to the next, or is this the first lecture in Global Solidarities? The first, right? In any case, we are here to...
It's the third, I guess, in a way.
Oh, I thought this is Global Solidarities, but we also have decolonial dialogues. So
they're the same.
They're the same. Okay.
Sort of.
Anyway, welcome to all of you after a long day and actually a long week. This is the end of our first week of the Institute. And we are here to listen to an old friend of the Institute, Giovanni Piquer, and Mackda Ghebremariam Tesfau, whom we're meeting today for the first time. And they are going to be talking about understanding and organizing against post-racial racisms. So now I'm going to read you short bios of both of them. I wasn't able to memorize these in the time that I had, so forgive me if I'm reading from my telephone. Some of this information I know about Giovanni, but it's the first time that I'm meeting Mackda too. So Giovanni Piquer is assistant professor of sociology at Glasgow University in the UK. His research is about urban studies and race critical theories. He is the author of Racial Cities, Governance and the Segregation of Romani Peoples in Urban Europe, a book that I have and have read, and it's wonderful, and co-editor of Racialized Labor in Romania, Spaces of Marginality at the Periphery of Global Capitalism, with Enrico Vince, Norbert Petrovici, and Christina Rath, and European Cities. This is the title: European Cities, Modernity, Race, and Colonialism. Manchester University Press, 2022. That's the newest book. And Mackda, I won't try to say your last name again because I did it right the first time and I may mess it up the second time, is a research doctor in social sciences. She obtained her doctorate from the University of Padua with a thesis titled, "Why Don't You Take Them to Your Home? Stories of Reception Between Refugees and Locals," in which racism and anti-racism are analyzed in an attempt to explain the connection between daily practices and systems of dominance. Mackda is a part-time lecturer at LUAV Venice and an instructor for Stanford Florence and NYU Florence. She collaborates with Razzismo Brutta Storia and is a resident curator at the Centrale FIES for the Agitu Ideo Gudeta Fellowship, an artistic residency grant. Mackda is actively involved in the anti-racist debate in Italy, particularly in the fields of education and outreach. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much from my side. Thank you, Polly, for the introduction. Thank you, John and Polly, for having us here. And I want also to express my deep thanks to Mackda for collaborating with me in this lecture. I'm really very, very glad to be here with you today and to deliver this lecture together. If it's okay, Mackda, I would start simply by sharing the screen. It's okay. Okay. Full screen. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, so today we are going to talk about a contemporary and rather recent re-articulation of racism, or if you want, a different kind, a partially different kind of racism that we are witnessing over the last 5 to 7 years, maybe, across Europe, that we have been analyzing with Mackda and I have been analyzing recently in an article which appeared in Ethnic and Racial Studies in 2021 called The Italian Post-Racial Archive, in which we examine this rearticulation, this new original and kind of partially very different articulation of racism from 2002 to 2018. But we especially focus on the period around the 2018 elections, national elections in Italy, as an illustration of the consolidation, the final consolidation of this kind of racism. And now today we want to walk you through all the steps of the kind of new kind of rearticulation. The subtitle of our talk is a focus on Italy. So we're going to talk on about Italy today, but we draw on literature, on scholarship that has been produced, especially about the U.S. And especially in the post-Obama election era, so post-2008 era, when Obama came to the White House. Many observers thought, okay, we are finally in a post-racial era where race doesn't matter anymore because we have a black man in the White House. And these kind of observations legitimated a partially different rearticulation of racism, especially against Black and people of color. So, and we have been witnessing with Mackda, by observing the political and media landscape in Italy around 2018, that those similar manifestations of racism, of a new kind of racism, were happening in Italy as well. And so our intent with this article is to expand the scholarship to include also Europe and one specific European context. On January 14th, 2018, Lega Nord candidate. Lega Nord is a xenophobic anti-immigrant party in Italy, currently part of the government, but it has been part of the government for many years now. Lega Nord candidate said on a print time radio show, Italy cannot accept everyone. That's about immigration. We have to decide whether our ethnicity, our white race, our society should continue to exist, or instead it should become extinct. It is not about being xenophobe or racist. It is rather about being logical and rational. So on February 2nd, 2018, the man you see on the center of this photo is Luca Traini, who was at that time a Lega Nord candidate, another Lega Nord candidate. And it was previously, before 2018, a Lega Nord candidate. What he did, he went through the street of Macerata, which is a city in central Italy, engaging in a shooting spree against Black people. And he wounded 6 people, seriously wounded 6 people. And these are 2 of the people that he wounded, and they are in a hospitalized. After he did this action, he wrapped himself in the Italian flag, gave himself into the police, heralding "Go Italy." And so we want to start from this kind of two events to raise 2 questions. In the scholarship on Europe, very often it is mentioned that in post-World War II Europe, it is not possible really to talk about race. It's quite taboo, the matter of race, because of the Holocaust and everything that happened. And also there is a sort of silence that, I mean, it's not possible. So there's unspeakability of race in Europe, but there is also a generalized silence, but people tend to prefer categories like ethnicity or culture, nationality. And if we think about these two events that I just talked about and the political and media reactions to them, then um, the issue of the unspeakability of race in Europe becomes relative, and it's the question is it really so? Because the political and media reactions to these two events were not actually centered on the presence of anti-Black racism and white supremacy, which were exactly the registers within which those two events happened. The first quote evidently is an expression of white supremacy, of one of the most violent expression of white supremacy, if you want, reminiscent of Ku Klux Klan maybe rhetoric. And the second, the shooting spray, the racial violence in the streets, is part of a widespread structural anti-Black racism that we have been witnessing in Italy for many, many years. But the reactions to these events were actually not justifying them, but relativizing them, saying that these two events, the shooting spray is an episodic individual event with bad intention. So it's an individual issue. It's not a structural issue. And Fontana, the guy who expressed his white supremacy view, remained a political candidate. So no real reaction happened. Nothing really happened. He ran for. He became the president of the or he was already, I don't remember, the president of one of the richest region of Italy, actually. So everything stayed more or less as it was. So the question is really, is there really this silence of race in Europe? Is really race taboo, or can some people be racist so freely and openly, and so is that become normalized? And so our answer is that instead of thinking that it's everything is like before, so there is a silence of race, but some people are talking about race, we think that there is a rearticulation or change of racism today, and this change is called post-racial racism. So what is it? Just to give you a brief outline of the talk today, I'm now going to briefly introduce post-racial racism in theory, and then we are moving on to our empirical case, which is Italy, and we are organizing the discussion in three parts. I'm going to cover in the first part, consolidation of a neoconservative bloc from 2000 to 2009. And then Mackda will be talking about building the post-racial, actually from 2009 to 2018, and contemporary expressions of anti-post-racial racism. So this is what we are going to do today. Okay, so post-racial racism in theory. David O. Goldberg is a philosopher who has been working and teaching in the US for the last 30+ years, and he has been working on racism from a philosophical and social theoretical point of view. And in 2015, he published a book called "Are We All Post-Racial Yet?" Drawing on, as I was saying, the reactions to Obama's election in 2008. And this idea that was widespread in the US, especially, that finally now race doesn't matter anymore. Instead, he argues that racism simply changed. It didn't disappear. Race didn't disappear, but race became a bit different. So I'm quoting from his book. Racism expresses itself in the extreme because it is linked from the constraints of its being named structural racial injustice. So the two examples that I gave you at the beginning are clearly extreme expressions of racism. But the fact that they raised almost no concern, or they didn't raise a concern in terms of structural racism, is, according to Goldberg, possible because these extremes are delinked from the constraints of them being named racial injustice. So there seems to be no need anymore to link individual expressions to a more historical and structural injustice. If you think of that, Italy was for 20 years a fascist dictatorship ruled by white supremacy. um, well, this tells you a lot. The post-racial, also, we need to understand that this post-racial articulation of racism or re-articulation of racism doesn't equal color blindness. So when you say, oh, color doesn't matter, we are all the same, and this is another form of erasing injustice, historical structural injustice. The post-racial rather actively erases not only the relevance of race, but the very possibility of naming facts, organizational logics, official discourses, and circumstances as racist. Okay, so it's something even more radical than simply just saying, oh, I don't care about color, whatever. In Europe, this specific articulation has been really studied. As I said, primarily that was a US kind of scholarship and phenomenon. But Salman Saeed, who is the professor of sociology at Leeds in the UK, he wrote for the first time a kind of systematization of the post-racial in Europe in 2017, I think, an article in Patterns of Prejudice. Key to post-racial racism, says writes Said, in Europe is a post-political rejection of politics. And he's drawing here on Chantal Mouffe, who is a political theorist, very famous political theorist. In 2015, wrote a book called The Post-Political. If we want to understand the post-political, we can describe it as the purely emotional rejection of any political ideology in the name of a self-declared morality based on suffering by those who engage in such rejection. And to understand better this theory, Wendy Brown comes to help us, as always, she kindly does, quoting from her book in 2009, when suffering as such is reduced to a problem of personal feeling, then the field of political battle and political transformation is replaced with an agenda of behavioral, attitudinal, and emotional practices. So in a way, justifications or explanations of individual or single racist expressions as deriving from simple individual consciousness or individual intentions or behavioral things like the shooting spray in the streets, the anti-black shooting spray in the street was immediately explained as, oh, there is this guy who has racist attitudes and racist emotions, so to say. Well, these are all justifications that are part of these phenomena, the post-political, which is intrinsic in the post-racial as a new articulation of racism. So going on to the Italian context, Mackda and I identify the origin of this progressive consolidation of the post-racial, so the progressive rearticulation of racism in the origin in the 2002 immigration law, which was promoted, drafted, signed, and then it was eventually accepted. But it was drafted and signed by the two leaders of the two most anti-immigrant, xenophobic, or racist, better, parties, the Lega Nord, which I already talked about, and Alleanza Nazionale, which is the direct heir of the fascist party. The fascist party was the Mussolini's party, which was the only party because it was a dictatorship, ruling Italy for 20 years, 1922, 1943. As I said, squarely based on white supremacy expressed in both anti-Black and anti-Jewish and anti-Roma racisms. This law is still in force. So it's still the law that regulates immigration in Italy. And if you have been following the news of death in Mediterranean waters over the last 20 years. This law can explain a lot, and the various rewriting of this law have all been going in the same direction of making the arrival to Italy very difficult, and making the life of those who arrive in Italy from the African coast extremely difficult, if not impossible, or even deadly. The political debate and the media debate obviously resonated with the post 9/11 backlash against Muslims in the Muslim world in general. And so one of the most famous, really famous Italian journalists who has been active since the 1960s, Oriana Fallaci, in 2001, in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, wrote, "Why should we give respect to someone who does not respect us? Why should we defend their so-called culture when they despise ours? I want to defend our culture, and I want to know that I prefer Dante Alighieri to Omar Khayyam." So obviously, this is a radical anti-Muslim, Islamophobic expression that was hosted by the main Italian newspaper, Corriere della Sera, the most widely read in the country. And Oriana Fallaci was one of the most widely read journalists and author, or essayist, and novelist as well. So a really authoritative figure. And so this is really, to us, this becomes a kind of a root of this kind of the linking racism from the need to name racist expressions as racial injustice. Okay, but these were kind of the first signs of this. And this is my last slide. It's the end of the first period that we identified, 2000 to 2008, and this is a political poster by Lega Nord, as you can see, in which there is there's a Native American person portrayed with the writing, "They have passively received immigration. Now they live in reserves." And then the last word is pensaci, which is think about it. And so this is an invitation by the Lega Nord to associate Italians with Native Americans, and then to deliver the message that Italians are currently being colonized by immigrants. And so this is the first time that these kind of posters emerged. This is a poster that is built not only on historical absurdity or mistake, but also in a clear and explicit attempt to confuse the people, to confuse the voters, to really create a narrative that doesn't have anything to do with reality. And if we think about Donald Trump, for example, the kind of rhetoric that he engaged with was kind of similar, completely mistaking many of the historical facts and reversing the kind of power relations that are in place. So I'm stopping here, and I am letting Mackda continue.
Thank you, Giovanni. So I'm gonna share my slide. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, perfect. So before discussing the second part, which is more, let's say, an investigation of two different focusing events that explain how in contemporary days from 2018 to today, we've witnessed both post-racial discourses and anti-racist responses. I need to point out that The same government that we had in 2002 and that Giovanni talked about is the same coalition that we have today in the government. The change is in the balance of the coalition. So it shifted towards Alleanza Nazionale, the party that Giovanni was talking about, that is the direct heir of the fascist party. So we can say that today we have the most far-right government since fascism in the country. And this is also why it was kind of, unfortunately, easy to draw comparison from the things we speak about, we talked about in the article to a more, contemporary events that we witnessed in the last 2 years. As I was saying, I will focus on these two events that explain this post-racial approach, post-racial and post-political, and what kind of response of answer the anti-racist movement brought on. The first is the murder of Alika Gorchukwu in Civitanova in 2002 and 22. And the second, maybe you've heard about both, but the second is the Cutro shipwreck and the so-called Cutro security degrees that were drafted before the shipwreck. So I will start with, I don't know why I cannot, okay, with the Alika Gorchukwu murder that happened in July 29 in 2002 and 22. It was in Civitanova, and what happened is that an Italian man killed with his I don't know how to say that, but Giovanni, do you stampella? So Alika Gorchukwu was a disabled man of Nigerian origin, and he used
Is it something to walk with?
a stick, let's
A
say.
crutch, maybe, if he's disabled.
A crutch, yes, a crutch.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And he was a street vendor in Civitanova. And he was accused of being too insistent with the woman of the murderer. So he was basically killed with his crutch in broad daylight in the most crowded street where the shopping takes place in this city in the region of Marche that is called the Civitanova, that is like a summer city with the beach. So it was very crowded with tourists. Marche is the same region where the attempted massacre of Macerata Luca Traini happened. And it's also the same region where another murder happened in 2016, that of Emanuele Cidinandi, an asylum seeker that was again killed by two Italian men in the street in broad daylight. So after Alika Gorchukwu murder, there was a huge debate in the Italian public debate whether it could be considered or not a racist murder, because the aggressor had what we call a mandatory, how do we call it? A mandatory healthcare treatment. So it means that because he had like psychological psychiatry problem, he was forced to have care and treatment. And because of this, the the murder was downgraded to an attack by somebody that was mentally ill. This narrative was very mainstream, and a lot of people debated and went around in television and in the newspaper. Most of them white Italians, white male Italians, and there was no trace of like the voices of racialized people, non-white Italians, anti-racist activists, or scholars, or anybody that had any clue about the fact that you don't need to be like completely sane to, you know, embody and understand and act on a certain violence, because this white noise, as it has been called by the anti-racist activists, was so loud. A group of anti-racist activists throughout the country decided to act upon that and go to Civitanova to have a demonstration. So it was this focusing event that created I'm sorry if I use this word, like English, it's not my first language, but let's say create the opportunity for these anti-racist activists to gather together and to actually have for the first time a coordinamento, an anti-racist alliance, a national anti-racist alliance that is formed by racialized people. So people that are speaking in their own name and embodying their own struggle. And the sign that was decided, that the anti-racist coordinamento decided to use for the demonstration was the crutch of Alika Gorchukwu, because it was invisibilized not only the racist, but also the ableism that was brought on this aggression. Like, if we know that Black and brown bodies are constantly concealed in the Italian panorama, this is even more true for intersectional experiences and existence. That is why the demonstration was called "We Are Still Standing," and the crutch was used as a symbol. And this is an image of the demonstrators kneeling as an homage to the Black Lives Matter movement. Also, you can see the colors that were chosen are those of the Black Lives Matter movement to reconnect this struggle to a global struggle for Black and racialized lives. I forgot to say, but this is very important, that the activists that gathered and created this coordinamento are all activists that not knew each other, but kind of collaborated before during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, and because of the pandemic, right? The pandemic was a great moment for linking struggles that were in different geographic, in different territories, in different cities, because of course we went online, and this is how the Coordinamento Antirazzista kept organizing after its founding. So the Coordinamento Antirazzista is still active, of course, and is now organizing its first political school. So even if the murder of Alika Gorchukwu was a moment in which at the public debate level, this idea of post-raciality, the fact that this colorblind ideology mixed with this post-political approach came was really evident. At the same time, in these during this time since let's say 2013, as we said in the article, but also 2018 and 2020. The community, the racialized community in Italy, have like different and more sharp, let's say, tools to understand institutional and structural racism and to organize, trying at least to create, to sustain different narratives on racism in the country. The second event I would like to point out, because I think it's really telling about about what me and Giovanni are saying, is the Cuto shipwreck that happened on the 26th of February in 2023. Maybe you've heard about it. It was a shipwreck on the shores of Calabria in Italy, in which 100 people died. And we know for sure, that the boat could have been saved, the people could have been saved if the government would have chosen not to send the Coast Guard instead of sending the Guardia di Finanza. Guardia di Finanza is a police force that is usually that is engaged in the contrast of tax evasion, drugs, and of course, in a kind of xeno-racist framework, these illegal migrants coming by boat were considered a threat and were considered, of course, were criminalized, as it happens with this sort of racialization. Hence, they decided to send the Guardia di Finanza instead of Guardia Costiera. The Guardia di Finanza couldn't reach the boat and came back telling to the authorities that they should have warned the Coast Guard because the sea was not good and the boat was in distress. But the Guardia di Finanza didn't reach in time the boat that like had more than one day. They had more than one day to reach it, and finally the shipwreck happened very close to the coast, to the beach, and the bodies of the people reached the shore. What happened after the Cutro shipwreck was that the Minister of Transportation, that is Matteo Salvini, against the Premier of the League, former Northern League, one of the main party in the government coalition, was accused of being fundamentally the culprit of this shipwreck. And Matteo Salvini answered with with a very post-political approach, saying that, thinking that the Minister of Transportation, he was called to answer because the Coast Guard depends on the Minister of Transportation, so he should have sent the Coast Guard out. And he answered to think that the Minister of Transportation, who is a father himself, not only said, but even just thought of not taking action is an outrage. Those who want to create controversy, play politics with these, should leave the state, the Coast Guard, in peace. So you can see how he totally shift the discourse from a political level of conflict because of his political choices to a level of to an emotional vocabulary, talking about the fact that he is a father, so a father would never do something like that, even if he clearly did it, and that like treating the people that accused him as they are traitor, like on a moral ground, traitor of the state, of the Coast Guard, right, and they should leave them in peace. And these are, of course, not the term of a political debate around such a relevant issue, right? The lives of 100 and a lot more people. And we know for sure that Matteo Salvini did this, and also worse, like having a ship like stopped without the chance of disembarking for weeks. But there's more to that. So after the shipwreck and after this delusional statement of Matteo Salvini, there was also a meeting of the minister in Cutro, and they announced their new security decree in the same city where the shipwreck happened, but having the people name the security decree after the city, so basically after the shipwreck, in a very paradoxical and offensive way, using a really xeno-racist, in the term of Pakete and Sivanandan, like charging this decree of xeno-racist, institutional xeno-racism. Just to say like 2 words about this security decree. Of course, this security decree was main goal is to criminalize further the so-called traffickers. We know for sure that traffickers actually don't exist. So the anti-racist movement usually says that if you want to find a human trafficker, you have to go to the parliament. Because what actually happened when people cross the Mediterranean is that people usually buy boats and then try to save them the best they can to reach the other shore. So there are no traffickers actually involved in the crossing, and of course, as Pakete showed us, criminalizing the crossing is not just unjust, because as we know, everybody, like as we know, the refugees law tell us that people that want to seek asylum can reach the country of arrival however they can. But it's also it also abolished a form of protection that was very important in Italy called special case, that were a form of asylum that was granted to people that comes from nations that are not deemed to be dangerous, but they are in need of assistance because of personal reason. And like most of the people coming from sub-Saharan Africa was using this sort of protection, of permesso di soggiorno, visa. Of course, after this decreto, there was a huge mobilization, a huge demonstration in Rome, when more than 3,000 people, as you cannot see it by the picture, but this is a picture of the demonstration. And you can see most of the people comes from like are fighting their own struggle. So there is a shift from the so-called white anti-racism to a more positioned, a more embodied voice. This demonstration was called Not on My Skin, Non sulla nostra pelle, literally would be not on our skin. And it was a chance of linking fascism, racism, and exploitation, and talk about the fact that this new government, while adopting a lot of measure not to actually claim its racism, is actually bringing on a lot of policies that worsen the condition of racialized people, people with migrant background, migrants, etc. In this demonstration, the Coordinamento Antirazzista was present, but also a lot of unions, especially the USB, that is an agricultural labor union based mainly in the countryside of southern Italy, and what it was moved by these deep understanding of institutional and structural racism, right? So it's the sign that the anti-racist movement is ever more aware of the fact that racism is not just about episodic racism, and it's not just about direct discrimination, but it's about institutional practices that reinforce the subjugation of the migrant and racialized population, in a sense that we understand that what these policies are creating is, or reiterating, if you will, is a strong distinction in the country between citizen and subject. I would just, I would stop here, so we have some times for question and answer. And if if there's something more you're curious about, I'm happy to answer to your question.
Thank you, both of you, so much. I will moderate the discussion, which usually involves just calling on people, because I think there will be a lot of people with questions, and I'll try to keep mine for the end. So please, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask Mackda and Giovanni. So I guess since nobody is raising the hand yet, I will take the liberty of asking one of my questions. So, many things I would like to respond to or ask about, but one of the first things that occurred to me was these killings in public, and I won't be able to remember the name now of the victim, the victims, or the victim, in this case, the Nigerian man, I was so aware of the way you described it, that this is such a public event, and the connection with lynching was so evident to me, because that I'm not even sure how many people in the audience are aware of these lynchings in the Jim Crow era, as it's called in the US, but these were always very public events, and in fact people took the opportunity to have picnics with their whole families at these lynchings, and somehow the fact that these are happening in broad daylight in public, I can't help but see the connection there, like a historical connection between this racism in the US context and what's happening now in this post-racial era of racism. And is this a common term, this post-racial racism, or is that just something that you are working with? Is that widely accepted as either Giovanni or Mackda? I don't know who I'm asking here.
Do you want to start?
Okay, Giovanni, if you want to answer more post-racial, then I can say something about the murder of.
The post-racial is an instrument to give a name to something that appears to many as partially different or radically sometimes different from more common, more familiar forms of racial violence or institutional racism, and it has to do with the fact that these extreme expressions of racism and I think the historical connection with lynching is on point. I also thought about it when I read about the killing. These expression of racism, extreme expression of racism, are not only kind of considered to be exceptional, or the consequence of individual individual intentions or state of mind, like in the killing in the streets, like the fact that this person was in treatment, and mental health treatment, or coercive mental health treatment, the murderer. But they are also considered they are not considered to be something worth discussing in a wider framework of a more, if you want, structural or even historical, and both understanding of racism. It's something that does not happen. This discussion doesn't happen unless it's brought up by activists, and that's why activists have understood this rearticulation of racism much better than anyone else, because obviously they are those who are interested more in that and interested in creating means of awareness of the fact that there is a lot of smoke in the eyes, there is a lot of confusion being created, like Salvini's speech after the shipwreck in Cutro. It's nonsense. It's completely nonsense. Why should we care that you are a father? You are institutional. You are a minister. It doesn't matter if you're a father. You're a minister, and as a minister, you are responsible for the death of 100 people. You are responsible for that. And instead, everything was about how good I am because I'm a father. And if you even think that I can be responsible for that, this is an outrage. That's what Mackda showed very on point, I think. So it's this kind of trying to confuse the waters and trying to say who is the victim, who is, and he played the victim there. Obviously, I am the victim of your criticism. You know, I am a father. I'm innocent by definition. Anyway, yeah. So post-racial is a term that was introduced in the scholarship in just after Obama election, and then it was mainly in philosophy, and then it was like cultivated in scholarship throughout the years. And then there is an article also talking about the post-racial in Brazil, for example. I think 2016 was the article. So Bolsonaro wasn't yet in power, I think, but almost. And our article is the first of this kind when that talks about the European context.
Thank you, Joe. And Mackda,
Thank
you wanted to?
Yes, I just wanted to show you something that is about the lynching and the connection with how lynching was used to sanction the relation, like the idea of the black man, the black rapist, or like the black threat to white women was used a lot to like. I wanted to show you these two manifesti, these two posters. One is a fascist poster, so of 1944, that on the right, and the other is the same poster that was used again by this fascist formation that is Forza Nuova in 2017, and the caption reads, she could be your mother, your wife, your sister, your daughter, and you have to defend her, like the old one. But then there is a new verse that say, from the new invaders, even if it's always this black man that once was this American soldier, African-American soldier, and now it should be a migrant. And one thing that is very interesting is not that only the murder of Alika Gorchukwu was considered to be linked to the fact that the murderer needed to defend the honor of the woman that was molested by the insistence of the street vendor that wanted some coins, right? But also again the massacre, the attempted massacre of Macerata was said to be very linked by the aggressor, but also in the public opinion, with the murder of another woman that was called Pamela Mastropietro, for whose murder, like some Nigerian people were investigated at that time. So what it has been said is that this man, Luca Traini, took justice into his own hands, then having this rampage around the city in his car, shooting two black people. So I think, again, it's not like analytically, I think really on point to talk about femonationalism. Still, there is this issue of the use of the xeno-racist use of women's rights and women's safety.
Thank you. And while we're looking at the posters, I just want to comment about the poster, which I guess Giovanni showed, of the Native American. They allowed immigrants and they ended up on reservations. So it's such a bizarre use of that trope of the noble savage, right? And making this identification between the Italian white population with the noble savage. I mean, it boggles the mind to,
Exactly.
to look at this and try to figure out all of the
Yeah.
yes. Anybody
I-
else? Oh, I'm sorry, Joe, please go on.
I just wanted to share another photo, which is very similar to what Mackda shared. And this is a photo, this is a poster representing what is meant to be a savage trying to rape a woman, aggressing a woman. And the writing is the similar, so the scene is exactly the same as the posters that Mackda showed. This is a poster by Forza Nuova, which is the same political movement that of the poster that Mackda showed. But this is not about immigrants, this is about Roma. And it's written, it's the same sentence. What if it was your mother, your wife, or your daughter? Close Roma camps, expel the Roma now. So, the same trope, the same image from the fascist period. So the first poster was really the fascist poster of represented allegedly rapist black men, is reproduced in different forms for different audiences and for different groups as well. But the logic is the same. Yeah, the logic is the same, and it draws directly from fascism. And so if we do not see this as structural racism, we really miss the point. The whole point is really that this is white supremacy as the quintessential example of white supremacy.
And this one, to me, it looks like it's a vampire or something. I couldn't really see it because of the writing, but it looked like it was a vampire attacking the woman, which
because of the writing,
like biting her neck, or I don't know. Anyway, these are.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this came out after the killing of the wife of a military official in Rome. And the first suspect was a Roma person, was a Roma man who was living in a camp, in a Roma camp, in a Roma shack nearby the location of the attempted murder that then eventually became a murder, so that the woman eventually died after the attack. And so the meaning here is to represent a savage I don't know if it's a vampire, but I guess the meaning is more like Roma really this inferior and racially inferior uncivilized population.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Any other questions?
I don't know if anybody is interested in this post-political, which I think in the Russian context, for example, may be applied quite easily.
If nobody else has anything to say, of course, I'm happy to monopolize all the questions. Only today, I was listening to one of these YouTubers who does interviews on the street, like street interviews. And this was in Moscow, and asking about, I forget what the particular question was. And so many people, it was about the separation wall between Finland and Russia. So already a very contentious sort of image, and many double valence is hardly, it's multivalent, let's just say that. And I have no fondness for walls myself, but in any case, this interview was striking because most of the people said that they don't do politics. Oh, that's a political, I don't do politics. I don't know. I don't understand politics. It's not, that's just something, no, I don't do it. And it wasn't really, sometimes you can tell that people want to speak, but they're afraid for good reason to, to speak out. But it was as though they had made a decision at some point, and it was not a very difficult decision just to say and be, above, beyond, just to de-link themselves from politics and just, I don't do politics, and that was enough. That was enough. And I do see this, this connection with the what you're calling the post-political, which is so much about rhetorics of silence and, and speech, like I can't formulate this right now, but this also is something that I noticed in both of your talks, that that this strategic and very selective adoption of silence, of deciding, no, we don't need to speak about that, and not speaking about it allows us not even to think about it. We don't have to go there, so yes, all these thoughts are. Kati has a question. Demonopolizing my contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I think it's given me a lot to think about, and I see also a lot of relations between Italy and Austria, where I'm located. I was just wondering, while Polly was talking now, and when you emphasized the post-political, like, would you say it's also post-factual? And like how, but if it's a post-factual, and if we are dealing only with emotions and like feelings and all of these value judgments, like, oh, I cannot be a bad person because I'm a father. I mean, they're very like post-factual, but like emotional. And how are people reacting to this? Or what do you think could be a political reaction or a repoliticization of the whole debate? Because again, I see so many connections and parallels with Austria, and in Austria, especially in Lower Austria, where I'm right now, we have a conservative fascist local government. And the whole debate is extremely anti-migrant, anti-asylum seeker, and it's purely emotional. There's no factual debate anymore. So yeah, I'm rambling on and on, but I hope you got my question.
Mackda, would you like to start now?
Yes, thank you very much. It's definitely post-factual to me, and I don't have anything to add on your comment, but just to talk about, to reiterate how it's really embedded in Italian politics, not only Italian, but like staying on the case study. For example, our prime minister is the first woman prime minister that Italy ever had, and is a fascist woman, and she became really famous in some way, let's say, after she gave a speech, and she started the speech saying, "I am Georgia," by her own name. "I am Georgia, I am a woman, I am a mother, and I am Christian." And then she repeated the same discourse in Spanish during a visit to Spain, saying, I don't know Spanish, but like, "Yo soy Georgia," okay? And the fact is that it became soon a song that people were singing, and I think it gained her some popularity, because she's really relatable. Then she wrote an autobiography, and it's called, of course, "I Am Georgia." And I haven't read it, so I'm talking, I'm reporting things that other scholars have said, but in this autobiography, there is a strong use of this emotional language. She is depicted as very relatable, like a woman that she is self-made. She comes from a history of marginalization. She also talks about fat phobia because she had some fat phobic statement, and talks about the fact that she was fat when she was young, to make herself even more relatable. And people are comparing this book to a book that could have been written by an influencer, right? So I think this is a whole package shifting towards a very different approach to what politics is.
Yeah, I just have a short comment on that. I want to share an article here at this link called "The Intersectional Politics of Bullshit." And this is really what it boils down to, really. If you want to look for something more systematic or more refined, more coming from a serious analytical thought, you won't find anything. It's really the politics of bullshit. And we have seen it with Donald Trump over and over. And sometimes I feel that in scholarly contexts, we just don't want to accept that things are so brutally simple. But I think we have to. So we just have to, and we have to find ways to uncover the conditions of possibility for these discourses to become powerful, to exist in the first place, and then to become powerful. And what we try to do with Mackda in this kind of article, and the reason why analytical perspectives are important, I think, is because they really allow you to uncover, unearth, unmask these conditions that make this brutally simplistic politics possible. Because they are rooted, obviously, as you said, Kathy, if people buy into it, it means that there is something that people really want to hear. And so what is it that appeals to people so much? And yeah, as Mackda said, be an influencer, don't be a politician, or don't be a politician in the concept of politician that we are used to as a man of the person of the state, or a kind of person who feels the responsibility of being an institution and not being an emotional machine. I don't understand. I don't, yeah, that's.
Thank you, Joe and Mackda. Any other questions? May I monopolize one more time, and then I think we're getting toward the end of the event. So very recently, I've talked about this in several other classes because it has like affected me, and I'm not sure how to which direction to run with it. The Dutch king Willem-Alexander recently apologized for have you heard that, Mackda's right? Yeah. Made a public apology for the role that the Netherlands played in the slave trade. And, I think it was a big thing. I mean, I wasn't there. I've just seen this on television, but not television, on YouTube, the computer. This has been, and I know that Joe knows this, there has been a lot of activism in the Netherlands to try to achieve this public apology. I mean, it's not reparations, but it could be a first step. And I'm wondering whether this will change the discourse around this. It does not seem so, because I think, at least not yet, because today the Dutch, the Prime Minister resigned, and the government fell apart over questions of immigration, but we know that that always involves race, right? So how do you view that? I don't know. Mackda was nodding, so I guess you have some ideas about what this might mean, what this might bode for the future, and is it like, am I crazy to feel like it's at least one victory for, you know, this activism that's been going on for at least since I remember, and that's like 30 years.
Thank you. I think that, like, following Becker's work, like acknowledging the responsibility is a way of challenging, or at least acknowledging that, like, this innocence, this white innocence that is very common also in Italy, right? Is not it's not possible to bring on anymore. At the same time, I am, as an anti-racist activist, I am involved in different contexts in which different institutions are trying to decolonize themselves. This is the word they use in a way that is really, I think, problematic. So there are different pieces of what we could call reparation that are happening in different spaces that are, like, to me, sign that that's sign that we are that what we say can be heard, but at the same time cannot be heard, right? Can be just appropriated by the institution that are just, most of the time, are just washing, blackwashing, or deco washing, as we could say. So I'm very, I am pragmatic. I don't know if this is the correct word, but I usually use this example as leverage in the discussion with other institutions, other actors, for example, or to bring on the debate. But at the same time, I'm not. Yes, I'm not sure this is advancing the struggle.
Mm-hmm. To return to the conversation in which we were talking about this, what one observation was that the colonial past of the Netherlands, it can be and is often romanticized, right? It's the golden age, and people are, you know, I think, quite proud of this, the, you know, the population, Dutch population at large. But when you have to acknowledge slavery, there are not so many people who are willing to think, oh, well, that was a you know, that was a proud moment in our past. I mean, it's a very different thing from, and in fact, we know that slavery and colonization are part and parcel of one another, but somehow people find it, I think, convenient or easy to separate them. And, you know, they can be proud of their colonial past or ancestors and all of the wealth that it brought the Netherlands. But then when you bring slavery into the picture and say, no, you know, these were slavers, and you know, this is genocide and so on, it really pushes the picture into a different direction. So I don't know, that somehow I actually couldn't believe it when I came upon that in a YouTube video and heard this public formal apology. So, well, so we are about out of time. I think we've gone over time, actually. And I want to thank you both, Mackda and Giovanni, for this amazing talk. And I hope you will return. I don't know whether I said this in the beginning, but Giovanni is a part of NYI already, has lectured and taught. And actually, I'm looking at Mackda and thinking, maybe she will return. So we'll probably work on her. And yes,
It sounds like a cult here.
I know, but
You have to return.
No, it's a
yes,
kind of colonization, right?
yes, it's
Sorry
we're
to say.
colonizing your mind. Okay. So thank you.
I
so
completely
much.
echo that completely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It was great. See you all next week.